Wish you had a thyroid fixer who could sweep in and shed some insight on why you don't feel good, even though you continue to test normal, or why you're exercising, eating right, and still not losing weight. And here's the kicker: you want to know the real reason why your doctor won't order the tests that you ask for. Don't miss this episode. My guest today is Dr. Amie Hornaman, a.k.a. the Thyroid Fixer. And I'm Deborah Atkinson. You're listening to Flipping 50, where I address your top struggles and concerns, and I share what to eat, how to move, and how to change your mindset so that you can have the energy and vitality that you want, need, and deserve in the second and better half. Now, back to Dr. Amie Hornaman. She is a.k.a. the Thyroid Fixer, has a podcast, in fact, by that name. She's a woman on a mission to optimize thyroid patients around the world and give them their lives back using her proprietary transformational program, the Fix Method. She's also the author of or founder of the Institute for Thyroid and Hormone Optimization. After her own personal experience of insufferable symptoms, misdiagnoses, and improper treatment, Dr. Amie set out to help others who she knew were going through the same set of frustrations and who were on the same medical roller coaster. She grabs your hand, gives you answers about your health no one has told you, and gives you the actual tools and personalized treatment to fix you. What makes her program unique is the extra support and accessibility that you can't find anywhere else. That's the transformational journey, with a focus on optimizing thyroid and hormone function and thus optimizing her patients. Dr. Amie looks at you as a unique individual and not just a lab value. She examines all factors that tie into thyroid dysfunction and thyroid symptoms and fixes you to give you your life back. Let's dive in to this episode. Amie, thanks so much for being here with us today.
Oh, thanks, Deb. Thank you for having me.
So, first of all, before we dive into the real heat of the moment and the topic, I think my audience, my listeners love knowing the backstory. Like, why this? Why are you not a teacher, a lawyer, or a plumber? And I also wish that they could see you literally, because you are one badass sister. So I've seen you, in your competition garb and seen you looking really good. So we need to let everybody know what your fitness background is as well.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for that compliment. I appreciate it. But yes, I am 47 now. So this is like 20 some years ago. This is early 20s when I competed and I did fitness modeling and I did figure shows. And just for any of your listeners that don't know what that is, I mean, basically picture yourself dieting down and putting on a bikini and standing on stage to be judged. I mean, it sounds horrific, but it was,
Sounds
right.
very dramatic.
That sounds like hell. But I mean, it was a challenge, right? So I was a fat kid in my younger years, and I come from a family of diabetes. So fitness was always a thing to me because I didn't want to go down the path of my grandparents and their overweightness and diabetes and having to, jab myself with an insulin needle. So I saw it and I didn't want to do it. So I always implemented fitness from a very young age. But then when I hit my 20s and I started seeing these competitions, which kind of took fitness to the next level, I wanted to get into it. So I had done many, many diet downs for the stage, for the camera, whatever it was that I was getting ready for. And I knew how my body responded. I knew what I was supposed to eat and how I was supposed to exercise. I mean, it was a little bit crazy. If you were looking in from the outside, you'd be like, oh, that's a little bit extreme. But it was fun. It was a challenge. And if you're a type A, you need that challenge to keep going, that next carrot. So I was doing many competitions, and this one in particular, and isn't this the case with all of us in this space? It's a pain to purpose story. So this one show in particular, I was doing all the things, I was doing all the right things, and the scale started going up. And 5 pounds went into 10, went into 15, went into 20. After 20, I stopped getting on the scale because I was
Mm.
getting pissed off and I didn't know what was happening in my body. I felt like it was rebelling against me. So I did, what we do. You go to your doctor. You go, hey, this is going on. And I'm a huge advocate, and this is for all your listeners too. You know your body, period. You know when something isn't right in your body. And usually you're right. I mean, I would say 100% of the time you're right. If you feel like something's off, it's going to be off. So I go to my doctor and I'm telling him all the things. I'm gaining weight. I'm really tired all the time. I'm eating clean. Here's my diet. Here's my workout. And they go, you're fine. Everything's normal. I couldn't even tell you that. I don't even know, Deb, what they tested because I wasn't in the functional space back then. So I probably got the same runaround that most people get and that my patients get before they come see me. There were probably only a couple tests done. And they kept telling me, you're normal, you're fine. So I went to the next doctor and went to the next doctor. And I was determined. I wanted an answer. At that point, I just wanted somebody to tell me what the hell was wrong. Like, just give me a diagnosis. I don't even care what it is. Put a name on it so that there's a pill so that this weight can come off. And then I can feel like myself again. And I was misdiagnosed 6 times. One doctor actually said, you need to eat less and exercise more. I'm like, I
Mm.
honestly don't even think that that's possible. Yeah, I remember crying in my car, like literally putting my head on the steering wheel, praying to God that something was wrong, because then that would be an answer and there would be a direction. So the 7th doctor finally does what the first 6 should have and puts her hands on my neck and says, swallow. And she goes, well, you have a goiter. There's something on your thyroid. We need to get an ultrasound test and this and that. And here's Synthroid, and this will help, take care of it. And I left the office so pumped. I was like, oh, thank you, Lord. Thank you. This is my answer. I now have a medication. This is going to take care of it. And 5 months later, not 1 pound came off the scale. And I felt no different. So I started doing some research on my own. I joke that I'm pretty sure I was either on microfiche at the library or on a big ass gateway computer, but I start looking things up and I'm like, oh, there's this T3 thing. And turns out that's the active thyroid hormone. So I go back to her, I go, hey, how about this T3 pairing up with this other med that you gave me? And that's really supposed to work well together. She goes, I don't do that. I go, well, I'm going to find somebody who does. And that's where I kept hearing this guy's name. He was a functional practitioner. And probably wasn't even functional at the time, right? We were using integrative and whatever the other terms were, but he was an outside of the box thinker. And I went to him and he did all the testing. He guided me. We did the right treatment, right diet, right supplements, and the weight came off and I got my life back. And he is now my mentor. I met with him when we were down in Tampa for a mastermind retreat. Lovely seeing him again. I mean, I credit him with everything because that changed my career. I mean, that totally shifted the trajectory of what I was going to do. And I went into functional medicine, and here I am today helping people like he helped me because he saved my life.
That is awesome. What a story. So since then, so that was in your 20s.
Yep.
I mean, have you flirted at all with figure competition anymore, or what's that for you now?
Yeah. Oh no. 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 I went from figure competitions, and even after I got my thyroid fixed, I might have done 1 or 2 more. That the one where I was gaining weight was not my last one by any means, but I actually transitioned from there into powerlifting because I love the fact that you didn't have to diet down and it wasn't subjective. It was objective. You either pulled the weight off the floor or you didn't. So that was very empowering, very strengthening. And I mean, I dabbled in boxing after that. And now I'm just happy that I work out. I work out hard for myself. I'm still strong at the age of 47. I'm planning on going into my 50s, into menopause with muscle, with the right testosterone levels, with an optimized thyroid, with balanced hormones. And I just love working out now for the power, for the strength, for myself.
Love it. Love that answer, really. And I love challenging anybody who's listening. I think it is hard, I think, as a female not to envy like a body on stage that's
Mhm.
standing there in a bikini, but it is such a, I don't know, it puts a woman in a specific kind of vein that, the frame of mind that you get to in order to reach that point and knowing, you couldn't sustain long term that kind of diet and exercise program and then come out with good health, right?
Right.
It's just, I think it's interesting, and I've always kind of, you know I think my feathers get ruffled a little bit, or I get confused when people call that a sport. And I know it is a sport. It's just like, gosh, it, it rubs me wrong somehow.
Yeah, I actually try to talk women out of competing because I do believe, as we're diving into topics of thyroid hormones, I do believe that competition, that extreme, because it is extreme. I think that extreme dieting and that extreme exercise was the stress to flip the autoimmune switch on me. So we always say with any autoimmune condition, Hashimoto's, Crohn's, psoriasis, celiac, there always is a stressor that turns it on. And I really think that extreme stress on my body is what brought it about. Now, I mean, had I not done that, it would have shown its ugly face at some point in time. But I don't recommend it because I do think it creates body dysmorphia. I think it creates eating disorders. I think it does mess you up internally. I've had many competitors after they hear my story come to me and go, "Oh yeah, that's me now." Like now I'm like 30 pounds heavier than when I stepped on stage and it's not coming off. So I think it does shift your hormones dramatically internally when you do that.
Yeah, totally believe that. And just to refresh listeners' memories, so I shared my own saga in 2019. So that was the year I actually went into menopause, but I had also been exposed to mold in the house I was living in. And so it was a really stressful time dealing with it, the mitigation, but then it wasn't fixed. And I had to move suddenly. Just a lot of, perfect storm, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of things going wrong, a lot of stressors, and physically, doing endurance training, it's not strength training, but it's the opposite. And, and we know endurance training of that level is, wreaking hormone havoc for most people. And I got away with it, 7 times prior, but this one, not so much, right?
Mm-hmm.
So literally also the weight gain. And it was like, okay, so just because I thought I was going to outsmart things again, not so much. Yeah,
Yep.
totally get it. So when we're talking thyroid, and that also disrupted my thyroid, that
Oh
was the
yeah.
first time I had the wake up call.
Mm-hmm.
So to listeners, and I think we've shared this information before, but I don't think we can go over it too much. I think we all need to hear it. And the question is, what thyroid labs should we be getting? You alluded to the fact that, no one had actually done thyroid testing on you or considered something wrong with that. But what is the difference between labs that are helpful and labs that leave you thinking or being told you're fine, you're normal, when you still feel anything but?
Yep. No, I'm glad you mentioned, I'm glad you prefaced that with we can't talk about it too much because I literally see this. I have a private Facebook group. Well, not private, it's a public Facebook group, but it's just for people to join and get more information. And in there, I get questions every day. And literally just today, I had a question post. And I think, Deb, you and I, everyone in this health space, we assume, right? We assume that people know. But you literally cannot say something enough because I still get the question, okay, well, here's my free T3, here's my free T4. Well, what about conversion? I go, you didn't even get the test for conversion. How many times? And I don't mind answering a million times. That's fine. But I think we have to always start back at the beginning and educate, 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 because some people don't remember and some people are just coming in newbies going, hey, I think there's a problem here. Wait, what are those tests that you said again last week? So yeah, when we're talking about testing, And here's the problem with conventional medicine. You're going to go into your doctor just like I did. And you're going to say, hey, I heard this lady on a podcast and she was talking about thyroid. Can I get a full thyroid panel done? And they'll go, sure, Mary. And they'll write it out and they'll say, okay, we're going to test your TSH and your free T4. And you go, great. That's awesome. Thank you so much. And that doesn't tell us anything. So TSH is a starting point. That's thyroid stimulating hormone, but that is not a thyroid hormone. It is a pituitary hormone. That's from your brain. And TSH is good to check. It's good to throw in the mix, but it's definitely not something that we diagnose you by. We don't hang our hat on it. That it could come back high, it could come back low. It tells us your baseline information. We have to move on to the actual thyroid hormone. So what the thyroid produces is T4 and T3. T4 is inactive, T3 is active. So when we're testing, we want to know levels of both because we want to know what's in your storage, what's in the tanks at the gas station. That's T4. It's great. It's sitting there. It's not in your car yet. It's not in your engine yet, but it's there for you if you need it, which you will eventually. T3 is the gas. That's what's in the engine. That's what makes your body run. That every single cell in your body has a receptor site on it for T3. That's how important it is. And shockingly, it is not tested often. So T3 is the active thyroid hormone. Every cell needs it, but doctors don't test it. It's unbelievable. So we want the free version because we want to know what is unbound, ready to get into the cell. So that's your free T3. Then beyond that, we have reverse T3, which I love talking about because it just proves how smart our bodies are. So reverse T3 is a survival mechanism built into our body so that if you end up in the ICU, the ER, you have a trauma, you're in a car accident, your appendix bursts, they will most likely test your reverse T3 and it will be high, and it should be, because that's your body saying, if you're in a traumatic state, you don't need to lose weight. You don't need to burn fat. You don't need to have a metabolism. You don't need to grow your hair. You don't need to feel good. You don't even need your brain to function. You need to survive. You need to get through this and survive. So the body will shut down other functions in order to shuttle energy to repair and survival. So here's the problem. If your reverse T3 is elevated and you're walking around trying to do life and raise a family and go grocery shopping and run a business and be a mom, be an entrepreneur, and be a wife and a girlfriend or a dad or whatever you are, we don't want your reverse T3 high and your body thinking that you're in the hospital when you're trying to get stuff done on a daily basis. That's why we test it, because if that is high, there's your brakes. So free T3 is the gas, reverse T3 is the brakes. If your brakes are on, the car is not going to move and your body is in survival mode. So many of you may ask your doctor for reverse T3 testing, and the response will be, well, I only test that if you're in the hospital. To which I say, yeah, duh, because it's going to be high, doc, if I'm in the hospital. How about you test it right now? How about you test it when I'm trying to live life? Because maybe that will give us an answer as to why I feel like garbage. And what if it does? What if that pretty answer is right there in black and white on the page and you didn't test it? So you have to have reverse T3 tested. It's a must. If you're on T4 medication, like how I said I was stuck on T4, that's all she gave me, it didn't do anything. We really want to test reverse T3, because what if that is all that T4 is converting to survival mechanism breaks reverse T3? Well, that's a problem too. So we need to have that piece of the puzzle. And then we need the antibodies. I want to know if you have Hashimoto's. I want to know. So we test the TPO and TGA antibodies, because then that tells us whether you have an autoimmune condition. 95% of all hypothyroidism is Hashimoto's. Chances are it's going to be there, or it's slowly coming. The only time we see kind of primary hypothyroidism is if you've had radiation, if you were on lithium, different antidepressants can cause hypothyroidism. So certain medications and experiences, treatments can cause the thyroid to just stop working very well. And that's that primary hypo without it being an autoimmune condition. But most of the time it's autoimmune. So those are all the tests that you have to demand. Or if your doctor says no to testing, get a new doctor. Because if your doc won't even do the basic test to find out what is going on with you as a patient, because you're walking in saying, I know my body and here's my symptoms. I want to know what's going on. And they won't even test for it. Time to walk out the door.
So what is up with that? So Amie, is that about a matter of insurance? A doctor won't order it because it's not covered, or why would they not order it?
So they might tell you that, but and I would even respect that answer more than just a no. Because if you tell me, listen, Amie, I don't think that your insurance is going to cover reverse T3. Number one, give me that answer and give me the choice. I should be able to say, that's okay, doc. Run it through anyways. I'll pay that bill when it comes in. Or I should be able to say, you know what? Thanks for letting me know. I'm going to go order it myself through Ulta or any lab test now or whatever it might be. But give me that reason. Unfortunately, most of the time, they just say no, or no, I don't do it, or no, I don't test for that. And here's the underlying reason. And I actually questioned multiple nurse practitioners and doctors on the why, because I wanted to know the why too. And it is because if they test for something that, number one, they have no idea how to interpret, and you would be amazed at how many doctors don't know how to interpret thyroid labs. Amazed. So either number one, they don't know how to interpret it, or number two, there's not a pill for it. If there is not a Band-Aid they can give, like, I'm sorry, if you come back with a low free T3, there's not an antidepressant for that. If you come back with elevated reverse T3, there's not a statin for that. There's not a Band-Aid we can slap on those tests like we can with cholesterol that, that would warrant testing it. So I think it's a little bit of insurance company. I think it's a little bit of lack of education on the doctor's part and not thinking outside the box to learn more.
Wow. Okay. You use the word amazed. That is not the word I would use. Okay.
I was being nice.
Yes, I could tell. Just want to point that out to listeners. That did not escape me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now let's talk about the other critical distinction. And this is optimal versus normal. So your doctor does order these things, and testing they order comes back, oh, well, you're normal, you're in the normal range, so must not be that.
Mm-hmm.
I, but you still feel badly, and they can't seem to tell you what it is.
Yeah, that's a big one. So, first of all, when you get your labs back, you have to remember that just because it's not red, there's not an H, there's not an L next to that lab value, it does not mean that you're okay. You don't need an H or an L or a red mark to have a lab value off, or to have a lab value speak to us and tell us a reason. We go by functional optimal ranges. So the best way, and I give Mark Hyman credit for this because he first gave this analogy, is the side of a barn. So if I sit you back 50 yards and give you a ball, and I tell you to throw it at the side of the barn, you're going to hit the barn. That's standard lab value range. It's wide, it's vast, and chances are you'll land in the middle somewhere. If I put a bullseye on the side of a barn and then I tell you to hit it, you may or may not hit that bullseye, but that is the optimal range. It's very narrowed down because we have done enough studies on people to say, this is where you feel your best, not out here or out here on either side of that bullseye, but right in the middle of the bullseye. That's where you're going to be optimal. That's where you're going to live your best life and feel like a badass. So that's where I want you. That's where we have to look at each lab value that comes back from an optimal standpoint and paint a picture. And I mean, sometimes it takes an expert to really paint that picture, because what I do with my patients, I say, well, first of all, those 4 words that I would bet money right now you have not heard from your doctor, endocrinologist, PCP, general practitioner in decades. How do you feel? Because your symptoms matter to me when I'm looking at these labs. And when I'm working with someone, the very first thing I ask, tell me those top 4 symptoms that drive you batshit crazy. Sorry, I'm not allowed to say that, but crazy. Too late. You can edit that out. That drive you crazy. And that's what we're going to have in our minds as we look at your labs. So if I know that your big symptoms are, I cannot lose weight no matter what, I do everything, and it's gaining, I'm gaining, the scale's going up, and I am tired. I am so tired all day long. I am tired. And I lose like 100 hairs out of my head. I put them in a bag. I look at this bag every day because the bag is filling up with all this hair that's coming out of my head. And I cannot concentrate at all. I swear to God, I'm getting early Alzheimer's. I don't know what's going on with me. Okay, then we're going to take those symptoms and we're going to keep those in mind as we look at your labs. And now we're going to look for those optimal lab value ranges and see if you are in them or not. And that way we can paint that whole picture. So is it low free T3? Is it low insulin? Is it low estrogen? Is it low progesterone? Is it low testosterone? I mean, whatever it is that picture is, and all of them feed on each other. That's what you falling in that optimal lab range or outside of the optimal lab range gives us a direction to go and a way to treat and a way to optimize you.
Love it. I love that. And I also want to tie this back for everybody listening, because I think in every single area of health, wellness, fitness, it doesn't matter how you're labeling it, but we tend to first like dive into things in a silo. And I know I get that a lot, like, just give me the exercise. What exercise do I need to do? Well, I first have to say, how do you feel right now? And what have you been doing? Because then I know the result of the habits you have had. And we don't necessarily want to repeat those if you're wanting something to change. But I have to know that. And so we know that exercise impacts cortisol, exercise impacts insulin, exercise impacts, so many other hormones and is influenced by them, that of course thyroid is going to also be a part. So if your thyroid is problematic for you, exercise has to change for you temporarily, at least until you're feeling more 100% you. So I just don't want that to escape them. But I want also to ask you this, because this is kind of coming back to this whole integrated piece. And so we can't just look at the exercise if we're going to get more energy, for instance. Talk about environmental toxins. So I kind of gave you that background when I was, that year that I was in perfect storm began with exposure to mold. I mean, and that's one example of an environmental toxins, but we should probably talk about all of them, or many, and bring up hormone disruptors. How does that play a role in thyroid optimization?
Oh, yeah. So environmental toxins ranging from mold to just the phthalates and parabens that you slather on your body when you get out of the shower, to what you cook in, if you're still using Tupperware, what you put your water in. I still see people walking around the gym with these big plastic tubs of water bottle thing that holds 5 gallons. Good for you that you're drinking that much water, but you're drinking it with BPA in it. So all of those environmental toxins produces stress, and there's a certain stress burden that our bodies can take. There's a certain, listen, we were built beautifully. We can handle a certain load. After that load starts, after the bucket starts to overflow, a lot of times people will use a bucket analogy. When that bucket starts to overflow with stress and toxic load, it's going to start affecting systems. And since the thyroid is the master gland, it is very sensitive to different toxins, to heavy metals, mercury. I mean, we know that. We can tie it back and see the effect that certain chemicals have on the thyroid gland. So we know that the thyroid's the master. We know it's affected. Now, that those environmental toxins can, like we said earlier, can be the stressor that turns the switch on. So while certain heavy metals and mold and environmental toxins can directly affect the thyroid, directly cause it to not work as well as it used to not produce those T4 and T3 hormones directly, just because it's affecting the thyroid gland. It's basically like it's shutting it down. They can also turn that autoimmune switch on, because that is a stressor. So a lot of times when we're talking about autoimmune, especially Hashimoto's with the thyroid, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, you'll hear women say, it was after my first kid, my second kid. It was after I entered menopause that everything started going to hell in a handbasket. And it's that because those hormonal shifts are stressors. I mean, even pregnant, I know pregnancy is a natural thing, but it still is a huge stress on the body. And it's enough to turn that autoimmune switch into the on position. And that's where symptoms start to present themselves. So the same thing with any kind of toxic load, whether it is you're living in a moldy home, and at first, okay, not so bad, but over time, that builds up in the system and it becomes too much for the body to handle. And that's the same thing with mercury fillings, amalgam fillings in your mouth. That's the same thing with microwaving in plastic, carrying around a plastic water bottle, putting on stuff on your body and your face and your hair that is just loaded down with chemicals. The body can only take so much. It has a tipping point. It has a breaking point. And you're going to see that in the form of symptoms first, because that's going to be what you notice as a person. You're going to notice that you feel like garbage, that the weight is coming on, that you can't focus, you can't concentrate, skin conditions, dry skin, more acne, whatever it might be. You're going to notice it in symptoms. And then we do some labs and we go, oh, okay, here it is. And like you, Deb, you probably did a mold test and you're like, holy cow. Well, it turns out I have mold in my body. So there it is in black and white.
Actually, I didn't, believe
Didn't
it or
you?
not.
Okay.
I didn't do one for my body. I did one for the house and
Uh-huh.
realized I need to get the heck out of here. And when I got out, I stopped having symptoms, started feeling good, and didn't tie, okay, thyroid went south with the mold. So I never did. And I often still wonder, should I test and see? Do I want to know?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, there is a certain level. You know what? I actually don't use mold testing for the body. I don't use it that often because just like you said, I'm glad you brought it up too, because I know a lot of functional practitioners are heavy into testing. I really like to save people money, right? And so all those functional tests that cost a ton extra, let's put those aside and use them when we have to. But we can do a trial and error approach like you did where you go, okay, test the home. If it's a move or go on vacation for like a week or two, go live somewhere else for a week or two and see if you get better. Do that trial and error thing. And then of course we can test the normal blood tests like thyroid, like hormones, like insulin, just do a basic CMP, CBC, and we can see a lot in those tests to know how your body is reacting or if it's on like kind of high alert, so to speak, if it's trying to fight something that's internal that we don't yet have an answer to. And then we can kind of, reverse engineer it back to, oh yeah, it's your house and it's mold. So yeah, we can absolutely do trial and error on people to see what the source is. So I'm kind of glad you did that.
Oh, good. Good. Because I was about to fish my way out of, okay, Amie, tell me, should I test? Yeah.
No,
So, okay,
no,
great.
no, no, no. If you're
Good answer.
now, if you have symptoms, so if you still
Mhm.
have symptoms, and actually, I would not say I would not start with mold testing. I would start with let's get you a full thyroid panel, full hormone panel, a CMP, a CBC. Let's test for Epstein-Barr because that's covered by insurance. Let's test for Lyme because that's covered by insurance. Let's test all of those co-infections first that mold can trigger. And then we can kind of step our way back. But let's start with your symptoms and then the basic labs.
Love that advice. Yeah. And that was just a mouthful right there for all of our listeners as well. All right. Well, Amie, as our time comes to a close, I mean, first of all, this has been a wealth of information and good summary, good recap in some areas, but you've shared some nuggets that we've never shared here before. And so I can't get out of here without asking this one tough question, and that is, while I have you specifically with your expertise in front of us, what's the question I didn't ask that I should have?
Oh, Deb, you're putting me on the spot here.
I
Okay.
know, right? It's terrible.
Okay. What's the one question? Okay. So I would say we talked about labs, we talked about optimal. Let's just really quickly, because I know weight, especially after 50, as you're headed into menopause, That's a big one, right? So we always hear about women gaining weight around the midsection. Midsections gets wider. And that, I mean, quite frankly, that's my fear because I'm already square, right? I'm already like kind of straight down. I don't want to get any wider than I am. I already don't have a waistline. So when you don't have to go into menopause fearing that. And I know you and I focused a lot on the thyroid, but because the thyroid is the master gland, it has this trickle down effect to hormones. And believe me, I love sex hormones too. I don't just do thyroid. We look at insulin, we look at sex hormones. So when we optimize your thyroid, you would be amazed at how your sex hormones, the estrogen, the progesterone, DHEA, pregnenolone, testosterone, all of those start to kind of come into play a little bit. They get a little bit better. Now, I'm not saying that we don't use bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, but when we combine proper thyroid treatment, when we combine a great diet and exercise plan, when we combine your bioidentical hormones as needed, the body can do amazing things, and you don't have to gain weight going into menopause. You do not have to, and I always say this, you do not have to throw in the towel because you're over 50. You don't go, well, my mom, she got all fat at 50 and just, that was it. That was the end of it. No, you don't have to do that anymore because we have the knowledge and we have the tools, and you have functional medicine out there, and we have people like you guiding women. You do not have to resign yourself. So tying back to the thyroid, we optimize that. We optimize your hormones. You do not have to gain weight just because you're going into menopause. So you do not give up. You keep hope. You keep searching. You keep educating yourself. You keep advocating for yourself. And it can be a beautiful process, not this thing that you resign yourself to and wave the white flag on.
Love it. Love it. Okay. And listeners, you know that I'm a huge advocate that we are setting the stage. We are changing the expectation for how we age in order that we can change the way we age and the way our daughters or our nieces are aging. It's been a pleasure. Amie, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, listeners. So now it's back to you. So is there a question that you wish I would have asked Dr. Amie Hornaman? You can put that below the show notes. And today that will be at flipping50.com/Thyroid-Fixer. And what are you waiting for? Let's start flipping 50 today.